thank you all for your responses to the survey. I've grouped, I put them into two groups. There's a lot of text in this slide. In the end, I will upload the slides for the presentation because they will be very useful for us and also for Robe and Kenzo. So I put these together, right? You can basically see who they, correspond to, right? So the first one is marinas. Which voyages include children or religious commodities or religious personnel? And of course, what are the descriptions? She wants the people, that are sheltering these children. And yes, the names of people, of course, the dates and the sources, right? That's very clear. So the big question is, how many people worked together and who they were? My question to that as a follow-up is that a big question? Or is that just, a basic analysis of the data, right? Because these is numbers, tabulations, and we want to see patterns. I mean, that's ideally what we would want to do. Okay, query number 2, Yasmin. So during the Ming-Qing transition, how many Western ships and agents went through Canton and Macau? And also interested in the sea routes. Those are all very good. Right now, we don't really have Western sea routes. We will be depending on Pierre-Yves to provide some, hopefully. But the other question, your main question, can be answered as long as Manila or Batavia are involved. And there are maybe some other voyages from the initial imports to the database. Okay, fields, governors from embassy of VOC. Are these people who are on these Dutch ships?
Yeah.
Okay, so the fields would be, the people, right? Their name, what we have as description of the person, and their identity, right? So the description would be, governor of, VOC. Their identity could be Dutch, and then in parentheses, VOC. And you would need the names of the ships and the dates, right? Okay, big question. Frequency of Western ships encountered with Canton and Macau during the period. That is slightly above just tabulated results and patterns, right? Because you're talking about frequency. But how are you going to define frequency, right? And compared to what? Are they more frequent than Chinese ships arriving at these places? More frequent than the Spanish? More frequent than the Portuguese? Are they more, is it something temporal? Are they more frequent in a certain period? Do they then stop, right? Okay. So the next group, and this is Mathieu and, Angela and Mathieu. I've left Mathieu towards the end. So Angela, how many diseases were recorded on board of the galleons during the 18th century? Very concrete question. Cases of recorded deaths on board galleons. That is a very fitting data description. And then the fields would be obviously the name of the ship, the year of the ship. Something that Marina emphasized is the source. Yes, the agents. That would be the information. And as far as the tables involved, it's not really events, but the tables that are related, and you will see this now when I go over the new movements layout. What is being tied to a voyage in which you have a calamity like diseases is actually a point from either the calamities table, and those are labeled as epidemics, or a point from the diseases table, which would be related to the person individually. And of course, if the calamity is an epidemic of a disease that we have in our diseases table, those two would also be connected. So the events table doesn't really figure out in this voyages scenario. So we have movements as the table, and then we have calamities, and we also have diseases. Big question, the names and numbers of galleons with recorded deaths on board. Again, that is a starting point for analysis. That's tabulation, that's calculation. Those are things that FileMaker can do. You just do a count field and it will show you. If you explore the tables, you will see some of these counts that tell you how many people died, how many people had a disease. That's very possible. That's more of a query. So the thing is, like, what patterns emerge, right? And there is a question of trying to figure out what kind of causality, temporality we want to involve in, in answering a big question. So query number 4 is Mathieu's. And I left it towards so I wanted to say that Angela's query can now be answered because of the addition of these new tables, fields, and relational structure. But we don't really have all the data yet. Mathieu's case is similar. We don't really have the data yet in there. I've tried to create the necessary fields, but it's a matter of experimenting with that. But I left Mathieu at the end because he thought about this very clearly. His was a very good answer, right? So thinking of the fields, the data points, locations, dates, food products, amounts, and sources, right? That was the part that was missing. And the big question, right? Were they adjusted over time for reasons related to visualing and replenishing, right? So how could you answer that? Maybe they've discovered a new island where they can get water that they didn't know before. And that new island with water changed things completely, right? Or maybe that island was occupied by a foreign power and now they couldn't go there and get water, right? Let's look for Marina's information, right? So Marina is interested in what religious people and what religious commodities are included. So here we can start with the commodities. Right? And there is a subcategory. Let's say subcategory, I think. Religious garment, religious paraphernalia, etc., right? And so here we see religious paraphernalia on 6 voyages, or 6 occurrences in the same voyage, right? In the San Martin. That's the 1586 voyage that Carlos captured. Here in the Santo Cristo de Burgos, we have a crucifix, Crucifijo de Marfil. We can see that. Right? So now, what about the people? So we have here, if we go to agents details, we have people who could be fray, right? Let's see what it tells us. And here we have, this one doesn't have any movements. We have Andres Urdaneta. Those are the only ones that show up there. But if we go to movements agents, we have, I'm going to look for Capellan, because I know that in some of the crew voyages we have Capellan. No, that's going to. So we have the Capellan for 14 voyages that were on there. If we were to extend to the description, agent label name, reference here, agent lookup, agent key, rank, agent description. Let's put fray here. And we go, if you want to, these are more advanced query functions. Extend found set. And so we got all these people so far that are religious. But that's not coded. So, but if Marina enters much more information about this, then she might want to find a way to code it, and she is the group lead for that group. So she gets to decide what the ontologies and priorities are. Okay. For Yasmin, we're not going to look at it in detail, but how would we look for your information, right? So we're going to start here because it makes it easier. So let's start with Macau. Or do we have? I think it's Macau. Okay, we want Macau. I'm adding another search, Canton, right? Let's see how many voyages go to Macau and Canton. We have 924, right? And he said he wanted Western voyages. So we would refine that search, right? And let's add Chinese here. But instead of expanding, we're going to omit. So this up here, it tells you how to omit. And then we go to constrain found set. And we get 702. And what year range would you want?
16.4 to 80.
80?
80, yeah.
Wait. Request, constrain found set. And so here we get actually just 13. Here the flag is not as Chinese, but yeah, the flag is not set as Chinese. That's still cleaning left to do and standardization. Okay. I sort of told Mathieu, the other place where we have information, you entered locations details, cross references to, we can't see that. I haven't entered that. Let's look instead to commodities details. We created Sweetwater. Okay. Maybe agua. We're gonna get all of the medicinal aguas. Agua dulce. The majority of the labels are in Spanish. Why? Because the majority of our commodities, if not all of them, come from Spanish sources. So here, this is the record that we created for as an example, with the additional variants in Chinese, shui. Type, it's cargo, foodstuffs. But I don't know if you commonly get water listed on cargo lists. If you get water, sweet water listed in cargo lists. Or if it's more that we know the place.
It's not me. No. Yes, you do have. We do have.
Okay.
When the costs are calculated. The whole list of food stuff is calculated.
So that's something that we could relate to a movement.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I think that you'd have to go through the commodities table. It would make most sense, since what you care about is the water, to link water to the place rather than doing it the other way around. Both are possible. And both will yield similar results, right? If I go to Amoy, for example, Amoy would be in locations. Okay, movements, it's gonna calculate forever. Related cross-references. So we have Amoy as a watering place here with what we created. We just don't have the source.